Once we come to understand the culture of the ancient Near East in general, we can look at the biblical material to assess similarities and differences, and then investigate what can be learned that will help us better understand the Torah. Of course, we expect to find at least some differences, but the similarities will show us that in the realm of legal thinking, the Israelites were much closer to the thinking that existed in the ancient world than they are to the way we think today. We will begin then by summarizing the legal materials that are available from the ancient world. We are going to look at texts that are similar to what we find in the Torah. In that case, we will set aside administrative texts and letters that discuss legal issues. We will set aside ritual instructions, legal reform decrees, records of legal transactions, both personal and public, and then contracts. In this quest, the most important document for our investigation are collections of legal sayings. These collections of legal sayings are most like what we find in the Torah, not only in content, but, I believe more importantly, in genre. The most well-known, most extensive, and the first to be found in 1901 in excavations at Susa is the stele that preserves 282 legal sayings embedded in a royal inscription of Hammurabi, hundreds of years prior to Moses. Hammurabi was a Babylonian king contemporary with Israel's patriarchs. When first discovered, the text was referred to as law codes, a label that reflected a presupposition derived from our cultural thinking. This view was believed to be supported by the relief that is found at the top of the stele containing the so-called Code of Hammurabi, which contains a picture of Shamash, who was the god of justice, seated on a throne and extending a rod and ring to Hammurabi, who stands opposite him in a deferential pose. Early interpreters thought this represented the god, which is Shamash, giving the law to Hammurabi just as Yah gave the law to Moshe. On further analysis, it became clear that the god Shamash was not delivering the material to Hammurabi, but the other way around. As more information about Shamash was discovered, it was learned that the rod and ring were neither the laws themselves being revealed, nor even the authority to make laws. Instead, they were recognized as Shamash's symbol of authority, and he was displaying them. Not revealing, not giving them to Hammurabi, but he was displaying them. When scholars began to notice that there were major gaps in the content of the law, that is, areas that were not covered that would nevertheless have been essential for a legal code, suggestions began to be made that these collections did not constitute a law, which is a code, that is, formal prescriptive legislations. When scholars began to notice that there were major gaps in the content of the law, suggestions began to be made that these collections did not constitute a law or a code. That is, documents expecting obedience or conformity as a response. The collection of legal sayings was then reinterpreted as Hammurabi's demonstration that he was executing justice in his kingdom, a role that the gods had appointed him to carry out, and for which they held him accountable. So the ancient Near Eastern legal collections teach wisdom, just as we hear from Moshe in Deuteronomy 4, verses 6. He says, "Observe them faithfully, for that will be proof of your wisdom and discernment to other people, who on hearing all of these laws will say, 'Surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people.'" The lists of legal sayings provide wisdom for judges who have to decide on cases in their towns. These lists showcase the wisdom of the king to discern what justice will look like. Wisdom being the ability to perceive order and establish it, comprehension and application, making it descriptive and not prescriptive. Remember, prescriptive documents expect obedience or conformity as a response. Descriptive documents expect comprehension as a response. In the ancient world, order was perceived as more than law-abiding obedience. It was achieved through wisdom exercised at the society level as well as the personal level.